make a hand-built mug, you're going to need a couple of tools other than your clay, 2 of these rulers and 1 rolling pin. The other 2 tools you're going to need, clay, obviously, and then a needle tool. You don't need that to begin with, but they live in this little porcupine-looking thing that is on the throwing table over there. And you'll also need a template. I have some that I've cut. These work great, or you can make your own if you want to make your own. It's in the sculpture center. There's cardboard and stuff in there, so you can cut one out. You want to make sure it's even on both sides. Make it a real rectangle. Okay, so since I know I'm going to be cutting a rectangle, I need my slab to be rectangular and not square. So I'm starting with a ball that's more of a kind of a rectangle, I guess more of a cylinder really. And I'm going to throw this out. And before I start using my rolling pin, I'm going to use gravity. So I'm going to throw it down, but not just flat down. I'm going to kind of pull it towards me. Pick it up. You see how there's a fatter and a skinnier side, so I'm going to have the fatter end be out. That's going to hit the table first and pull it towards me. And I'm going to keep going in this kind of rectangular direction because I want a rectangle. Okay, so once I have a decent rectangle going, I'm going to put these rulers on the side to keep me even, and I'm going to use my rolling pin, and I'm going to roll it. Now, if you're doing one of these, you're also going to need a canvas tablecloth, which are in the clay tools area, right in this blue box in here, folded up nice and neat. Now, if you're done over there, and you're the last one you have to clean up, if someone else needs to use the tools, then when they're done, you should help them clean up. And that is going to be, these are fine. These are easy. They're good. Just put them back in the clay closet in their bucket. This needs to be wiped down, and we have these handy dandy wipes right here. So you can use these with clay. You may want to get one of our kind of gross sponges and wipe it down with the sponge first and then go over it with the Clorox wipe. This is a different story. You're going to want to come to the throwing area where these pink buckets are that have a lot of water. You can't really see over here, but there's a couple of these rolling pins that I was washing out. So you'll just bring it over here and use a sponge. If you do it right away, then it comes off really easily. So perfect. So I wipe that off. I'm going to dry these off and just put them back where I got them from. Now that you've cleaned up from that, it is time to come work on your canvas cover, canvas tablecloth. And I'm going to take my my template, and I'm just going to move it to a spot where I can save some of the rest of this clay. And I actually saved this piece was getting a little long and I cut it off. So I saved that too because I may be able to use these things for the bottom of my mug, the base, or possibly even the handle. So I'm going to use my needle tool straight up and down and cut this out. Okay, so now you're going to need to score and slip the sides of your mug together, and you need a water cup. A yogurt cup is fine, or I have a couple bowls for water. You can use those too. And you need a scoring tool, which you can use your needle tool, or if you can find one of these babies, these are awesome. It has multiple needles, I guess, for scoring. So these are just in the clay tools buckets. So I'm just going to use this to quickly scratch up the sides, both the short ends of my rectangle, and those are the ends that I'm going to join together. You could do the same thing with the needle tool. It just takes a little longer. You can also use a toothbrush, and I have a tub of toothbrushes if your clay is nice and wet. Otherwise it won't be nearly strong enough. So I'm going to add the water to the sides and then join them by blending. Now, if you make your slab on one class day and it's been wrapped up waiting for the next class day, that'll be nice because your clay will actually have had a chance to stiffen up a bit, and it won't be as mushy as I'm having to deal with. I'm just going to go ahead and support the inside and blend my line. You could also make a coil . Now, as I'm thinking about this little mug here, you might want to actually work on the design of your mug before when it's flat. So if you are planning on putting textures or a scene on this with carving, it could be nice to work on it while it's flat. But if you are going to use Sgraffito, I think it's better to just go ahead and make it into a mug. So now that this is joined, and I'm going to kind of get it into a nice round shape as I can, then I'm going to pick a piece of my clay to be the base. I'm just going to save clay, and it may not even matter, but I'm going to put it towards the end instead of the middle. That way, if someone else needs it, they could use it. There's probably enough for 2 mugs on there. Or if I end up wanting to use it for something else, I'll have it. So once again, I'm just going to trace around very carefully with my needle tool. Okay, now this mistake I made was I really shouldn't have picked it up. I was kind of doing that for the video, but I wouldn't pick it up, and that way you can get a better circle on yours. But then you're going to go ahead and score and slip around the base of your cylinder and around the edge of your base for the mug. You're going to, you scored, so now you're going to slip. So I'm going to join the top of my mug to the base, and I'm going to use my fingers just to smooth, just like I did on the seam, the side seam, I'm going to do on the bottom seam. So you can definitely tell here it's 2 pieces of clay. I want it to look like 1 piece of clay, like over here. These bases are nice because it just gets it up closer to eye level. I only have 1. We need to get some more, but if we don't have enough, yogurt cups also can work. The big ones, not those little guys. And I have a bunch of big kind of containers underneath the sink. And then I'm just gonna grab one of these sponges. These are in the sponge bowl on the throwing table, and you know, when we used the table, it leaves a texture. That's not the texture I want on my mug, so I'm going to smooth it off. Think about your rim, and this is a nice rim, but if you want, you know, lips are going to be drinking off of it, and lips kind of prefer somewhat of a rounded edge. It's a little more comfortable. You can ask your lips if you don't believe me. But I'm just going to try pinching this. If that's not the kind of texture you want on the end of yours, you could try to get that in another way, maybe smoothing it with a sponge. There's also the seam on the inside. On the outside it looks fine, but if you can see on the inside, I don't know if you guys can see that, but I can definitely see a seam. And if you want to reinforce that, you can make another coil. You guys know how to make a snake. Just making a coil in my hands. I would make a pretty thin one. And you can just score and slip the inside of your seam, and you can score and slip your snake and press that in there. I think this actually also, even without adding the snake, you could also add one around the bottom. Okay, now for the handle, this clay is still pretty wet. If you had leather hard clay, I would not do this. But I'm gonna stack these two pieces, and you could score and slip on the inside, would probably be a good idea. Okay, so I want a pretty decent long rectangle, and I may have actually made mine a little short, but depending on how long, how big you want your handle or how much you want it to turn, I'm going to start with this rectangle, and I'm going to use my hand to, I'm wanting to make it look less rectangular, and I'm going to soften the edges. I'm going to pinch. Sort of pinch on that. Flip it and pinch on this. I'm going to use my palm. Sorry, this is going to make the shape. I'm going to use a soft palm. Have my wrung out sponge I'm going to use. Now the top part where it's going to attach to my mug, that is going to be straight. And I'm going to score and slip a straight edge there. Let's see, I'm going to put it opposite where my coil was. If you want to do it very, very carefully, you will actually let your handle set up before you try to attach it. So I'm going to forget I did that, and I'm going to cut this side at an angle to match the mug. You can see that. So this one is flat and this one is more at an angle, so that it can come out of the mug like that. So now that I know this is how I want my handle, that's how I want the shape to be, and it's still pretty wet, so I'm just going to let it set up a bit. And if you actually wanted to let it set up and then do the sponging on your mug, that would be a good use of your time. But just for the sake of our time in this demo, I'm going to go ahead and score and slip this baby on there. So I'm going to score both my spots. If I add a little water and then place it on my mug, then it shows me where to score. And you're going to do the same thing from before, where it's not just about the scoring and slipping. That is important, but you really need to pull the clay into each other so that those two pieces become one. Any time that you can tell, like this looks like it, it looks like one piece. This right here where you can see the seam, that does not look like one piece, and that has a higher chance of cracking and not really sticking together very well. And if you can't reach your fingers in there, just use a tool. Okay, and that is the quick way of how to make a mug from a slab. Of course, you will have to clean all this stuff up. If we're doing clay, I have two different recyclings for clay. We have throwing clay, which has the recycling bin underneath the wheels. This clay does not go in there, so just ask me if you're not sure. I usually will probably have a bag on the main table for our recycled clay.